Super 8 is directed by J.J. Abrams. He's from, well, I mean, you should know, he's from Star Trek fame, Mission Impossible, but probably more likely known from Lost and Alias and the other TV shows. Felicity, yes. You'll never let him forget. But I have to remember the kid's cast name because Joel Courtney, Kyle Chandler is the father of Joel Courtney, not a child cast, and Elle Fanning. The movie itself is about a bunch of local kids that like to get together and make a movie.
Monster movies.
Monster movies, exactly. And what they are trying, basically they're trying to up their production value, and so they go out to this train yard and this horrible accident ensues, and it basically becomes this kind of a monster movie after that, where they're being chased by this alien, and it kind of has the Spielberg kind of Goonies feel. What I have to say about this film is the child cast was actually they were well done. It didn't have as much of a Goonies feel as a J.J. Abrams kind of direction feel with them.
Yeah.
But I will say that the adult audience, not the adult audience, but the adult actors in it, I thought were mediocre. They didn't hit their lines sometimes. Besides not hitting their lines very well, they also tended to underact, or I just didn't believe them. The other thing is, it was too much Spielberg and not enough Abrams. Abrams tried to do what Spielberg does, but he didn't do it as well, and it came off to me as just, there was parts where he was trying to get that sentimentality that Spielberg does do, and he does well, but I didn't think Abrams did. He didn't hit the marks. They just seemed sentimental for some
for
random
the sake of thereof.
And I just didn't care for it. Those were all the scenes, any scenes where they were trying to make the heart punchy kind of the mother died scenes. I, for one, just was like, I don't believe it, I don't buy it, it doesn't really work for me. But, I mean, and even the monster stuff, I mean, it was good, but it wasn't what Abrams is capable of.
Yeah.
He does a very much more intense and kind of...
intrigue.
Intrigue, yeah, exactly. That's a great word for that. He inspires intrigue and that kind of stuff, and this film wasn't about that.
Yeah.
He did that in the marketing, and the marketing was wonderful for the intrigue and stuff like that. But in the actual movie, no. It just seemed really quite bland, to say the least.
Okay.
I would give it either a C+ or a B-. I'm a little undecided just because I like the subject matter, but I think I'm going to have to stick with my guns and say a C+ on it because it just didn't hit where it was supposed to hit for me.
All right, I'm a little bit more on the positive end. I give it a B+. And I do agree with some of the things. I mean, we saw this movie together, and I was really pumped for it. And when I came out of the theater, I said I liked it a lot, but I really wanted to love it. As we've discussed before, I think for me the big problem is that he doesn't handle suspense very well in the same sort of way that Spielberg does in these kinds of movies.
Well, he's always done a building intensity.
His stuff is all about character and all about intrigue and mystery. And there's a little bit of that in here, but he really is trying to capture that early 1980s Spielberg presents quality. And I guess it's probably as good as some of those movies were back then, like Goonies and whatever. And you will feel very nostalgic. If you grew up in that time, if you were watching them on VHS back in that time, you will watch this movie and you will get very nostalgic. And for that, I loved it. What I didn't love is that I felt like the monster design was sort of uninspired. It reminded me a little bit of the Cloverfield monster.
See, I thought it was a grown-up E.T.
Yeah, kind of mixed.
Just with more arms.
And in general, the build-up for this big thing it doesn't live up. Once all the questions start getting answered, it's a little disappointing. I do think that the child cast is very good. Riley Griffiths, who plays Charles, the movie maker, he gets all the best lines in the movie. He's very funny, very...
that's the chunky kid, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's making the Super 8 film. And Elle Fanning, I think, is terrific. Of course, we recently reviewed Somewhere, and I think she definitely has a bright future. as well as Joe Lamb. The kid cast is wonderful, and I like movies like this that have a child ensemble.
Okay.
And where you really feel like, like Goonies and Sandlot and Stand By Me and those kinds of movies. And I felt like this has been the best movie like that since those. But I do think that the suspense, horror, and science fiction elements of the movie fall a little flat for me.
I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of, but like I said, I didn't get the nostalgia. I grew up with those films, and the nostalgia to me just kind of came off as it just came off more at that sentimentality
Too
kind
contrived.
of rate. And it did. It seemed very contrived to me, and I don't think it pulled off completely what it wanted to. And it seemed like, and with those Present movies, they kind of had that Spielberg mark on it, but they were their own entities.
Yeah, Joe Dante brought something of his own to Gremlins.
Goonies with Richard Donner. They all had their own little thing. I mean, even in Goonies, the kids had that. I mean, he kind of copied that in Super 8 a bit, but what it didn't have is it didn't have its own originality to it. I didn't see the J.J. Abrams mark except for maybe how the film was shot. The other thing that I did not like about it is the camera flares. I thought it worked great in Star Trek, but in this movie it was just distracting. I was just
it seems like it's becoming
it
his little signature, and it is something he needs to get rid of.
Right.
All right, well, we'll move on now to Terrence Malick's Tree of Life, and here is a clip for that.